Once again, please feel free to ask whatever questions you might have in Thai or in English. Please don't be shy. Yes, right. Good.
In the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta that we chanted, there were groups of words, but Panya Uttapati, it wasn't translated as wisdom. There was a word discernment. So my question is around that. If it's not just a matter of word, what was the discerning process? And if it's so, how do we apply that discerning to the practice?
Well, I'm not sure, because I wasn't involved in the translation for the Wat Nanachat chanting book. It's their version rather than the
this version is Pikupot.
The Dhammacakka. So I also know that Ajahn Thanissaro doesn't like the word wisdom for Panya. So he uses the word discernment. I'm quite happy with wisdom myself, but I think for some Westerners, the word wisdom, it conjures up images of wizards with tall hats with stars on them and Professor Dumbledore. And so that I'm not sure, but I know that particularly Ajahn Thanissaro, who's a very prolific translator, never uses the word wisdom, or hardly ever, and uses discernment as a translation for panya. He uses the word stress as a translation for dukkha, and unbinding for the translation of nibbana. So he has a particular set of terms he likes to use. So wisdom, literally the English word, the wis part of wisdom is connected to vijja, and vision, seeing, to the word wit, to know. They're all connected. So the Pali word vijja, or Sanskrit vidya, the word wit in English, W-I-T, which we tend to mean a sense of humor, but its original meaning is to know. Like in the phrase to wit, that is knowing this. So that I feel wisdom is a totally okay word to use, and I don't have difficulties with Professor Dumbledore coming into the picture. I don't particularly like the word discernment, because it implies a bit more of a sense of detail, or discriminating one thing from another. And I feel that wisdom in the Buddhist sense is more radical than that. It's a quality of knowing that that this discriminating can come from that, but it's the knowing which is completely attuned to the present reality. And so out of that knowing, then there can be discernment or discrimination of, one thing as distinct from another. But I feel the word wisdom has a more radical and complete quality. So personally, I like the word wisdom. But it's also interesting in the Dhammacakka Sutta, what the Buddha does there: Chakhung Uddapadi, Jnanam Uddapadi, Panya Uddapadi, Vijja Uddapadi, Aloko Uddapadi. So there's a whole string of 6 words that all basically have the same meaning. And one of the comments that was made by an elder Sri Lankan monk, who Venerable Ananda Maitreya, who he spent his 70th pansa at Amaravati. He had more pansas than the whole rest of the Sangha put together. His upatak was senior to Lumpur Sumedho. So he's very, very elder, very senior monk. So he spoke about 13 or 14 languages. He could converse in Pali, and so he recite the whole, whole sections of the teachings like the Mahavagga and so on. So extremely competent with Indian languages and Pali, and knowledgeable about different Indian languages. And his theory was, because you get this kind of sequence of words quite often in the Buddha's teachings, like a whole, maybe 5 or 6 or 7 words all seem to have a similar meaning, like one after another, after another, after another. Just like in Chakung Udapadi, Jnanang Udapadi, Panya Udapadi, Vijja Udapadi, Aloka Udapadi. And so his theory was that it's probably the case that in Vangsa they used Panya, in Uttarakuru they would say Vijja, in Magadha they would say Aloka, and that it's more kind of regional. So like the Chiang Mai dialect or the Chiang Rai dialect is different from the Suratani dialect or the Paklang dialect or the Kanchanaburi or the Ubon dialect. So you're kind of putting out different terms that kind of have a related meaning, but so the word that Ubon people would use wouldn't connect with the people from Kanchanaburi and so from Surat and so on. And so I thought, well, that makes a lot of sense. And Shakespeare used to do the same kind of thing, that he would use a string of terms, maybe not 5 or 6, but 2 or 3, 3 or 4, because similarly having a varied audience, because the Buddha was often speaking to people from all kinds of different regions, and so that using a language that everyone can understand, it's like a skill of a teacher. If you're a teacher in a classroom, like a university teacher or a school teacher, you're trying to talk in a way that all of the students can follow. And if some of your words are lost on them, you use different words to connect the meaning. So again, I wouldn't be too rigid about discernment. That's the correct translation, and wisdom is wrong. But I think we each find our own feeling for the words, and then it's most important to get a sense of what the quality is that the word is referring to. What is this that the word panya is indicating, and so on. Yeah,
no comment, but just listen to your explanation. I think it makes more sense for me now, because that normally I would consider it as sequence. Chakung lead to, but when you explain in the same thing, different aspect of the same thing, it makes more sense, because that panya put in the middle, because normally we would consider panya as the top one, right?
Yeah.
Why is here Vicha come later, or Aloko, which for many Thai Aloko Sang Savang probably doesn't seem to be that much comparing panya. But then how the Buddha put it in this group of 5 or 6 here, yeah. So, but when you say that it's the same thing in different aspect, yeah.
And so it's a teaching style that the Lord Buddha used, because he was a supremely skilled communicator, and so that and he had knowledge of these different languages and regions. And I remember when Venerable Ananda Maitreya talked about it, oh, that makes so much sense. And because he had knowledge of many different languages, then he also had the sense of, oh yeah, in the Buddhist hybrid Prakrit, they use this, or in Gujarat they use this word for this. In Orissa they use this word. In Bengal they use this word. So he would be familiar and say, "Oh yeah, it's a similar range that you're expressing." And so that in many places in the teachings, you find that same kind of string of adjectives or nouns that are used to describe a particular quality. Somebody could probably write or probably has written a thesis about that. But any PhD candidates looking for a subject, that's a good one.
Another aspect I think that would be interesting is that because the aim of the Buddha here, if you understand the context, he wants to convince all the 5 ascetics that he already knows. So that's why it repeat. There's a lot of repetition in this sutta. So we can really sure of his enlightenment.
Yes.
If I may, I think one of the reasons that I ask is because I think and I doubt. So when I meditate, things do not like calm. There are different layers and different things. So I was wondering if I should discern. So just no.
I would say the short answer is no.
Not discern.
Just know that you don't know. That's another long Pali word. Ananya tanyasa mitindriya is the faculty of knowing the unknown. Ananya tanyasa mitindriya, knowing the unknown. Yeah, so most of life is completely mysterious, I would say. We focus on the little bits that are not mysterious and we can talk about, but 99% of life is very, very strange and inexplicable and mysterious. And so that faculty of knowing the unknown, it's like you know that you don't know. You know that you don't understand about this or that or how things work or where they come from. Actually, all the leaves on the trees in the forest that we don't understand, we don't know. Like for a scientist, I remember speaking with a physicist, and he said, you know, if you ask a high school chemistry teacher what's an electron, they can explain it in like 3 minutes. If you ask me what an electron is, you know, how many months have we got? So, you know, the closer you look at things, the more inexplicable and strange the universe is. What's gravity? We feel it, but astrophysicists, quantum physicists kind of hard to explain. So most of life is mysterious. And the mind, you know, what's the physical basis of mind? Yeah, again, most scientists don't even go near that one. There have a few people have made a few comments, but very, very few. So most of life is mysterious. And so the ananya tanyasa mitindriya, the faculty of knowing the unknown, is like, this is the experience of the present. Most of it is inexplicable. It's strange, it's mysterious. But there is a knowing that you don't know. That's why a couple of days ago, I was saying about Lumpur Sumedho not being comfortable with sati sampajanya, translated as mindfulness and clear comprehension. He said, yeah, we can be fully aware of things we cannot comprehend. And so he developed the use of the term intuitive awareness as a translation for sati sampajanya, deliberately, using the word intuition, which is fuzzy. Yeah, intuition is it's indefinite. He thought, yes, that's what we need. So because most of life is incomprehensible, not comprehensible. So Boon, please.
กราบนมัสการพระอาจารย์ทั้งสองครับ Now that your write-up has started on the English language, may I follow up with unborn, unoriginated, uncreated, and unformed, please?
In what respect?
The respect that when it's ajatang, aputang, katang, I have read before some Thai words on that, and I still don't have any idea about exactly what each one try to say.
As I've been saying, these are all those uns give you a clue. The unborn, unoriginated, uncreated, unformed, abutang, ajatang, abutang, akatang, asankatang. So that it's basically that fundamental reality is not imaginable by our thinking mind. That the usual reference points we have of place, you know, me here, you there, this place, that place. So 3-dimensional space doesn't apply. time doesn't apply, birth and death don't apply, individual identity doesn't apply. There's all the usual reference points are gone. And so the Buddha didn't speak about this quality of ultimate reality very much, because he knew that the mind borrows from its habits of experiencing and perception. So you say, there, like in the similar teaching in the Udana, this is sutta number 8.3, 8.1, 8.3, I think is, there is that ayatana, that sphere of being, where there is no earth, water, no fire, no wind, no sun, no moon, no stars, no coming, no going, no standing still, no coming into a being, no dying, no reappearance. It has no basis, it has no support. So when you use those kind of words, it's like, well, that sounds like a kind of moonscape, like with no stars, really boring. Yeah, no earth, no water, no fire, no wind, no sun, no moon, no stars, no dying, no reappearance. Wow, really boring. It's because we borrow our image of a place or a dimension from our experience of living in the world, seeing the stars and the ground and the air around us. So what these words are doing is pointing to, there is that quality of the Dhamma, which is outside of time, outside of space, outside of the usual reference points. It is the ultimate reality. At the end of that other teaching, he says, this, I tell you, has no basis, no continuation, no support. This, I tell you, is the end of suffering. So for most people with worldly patterns of thinking, it's like, wow, that sounds really awful. Nibbana is a terrible place. It's like a kind of a moonscape with the stars turned off. Oh, horrible. Meow. I definitely can't take my dog, you know. So because we're comparing it to our everyday experience, but he's in these few teachings where he spells it out like this. He's saying there is this quality, and also very significant in this teaching is the verb ati bhikkhave ajatang abhutang akatang asankatang. The ordinary word for to be, like you are Boon, I am Ajahn Amaro, today is Wednesday. That is, yeah, you are Boon. That would be hoti. I am Ajahn Amaro. That's hoti. Today is Wednesday. That's the verb hoti. The verb ati is used for that quality of being that is outside of time, outside of birth and death. So the Buddha specifically uses that verb to be, that's completely different from hoti, to refer to these timeless realities, unborn, unconditioned realities. So it's not used very much in the suttas, but where it is, it's always referring to ultimate truth, the paramatta satya. So that these teachings are, in a way, is basically saying, let go of birth, let go of being, let go of formation, let go of cause and effect. As Luang Por Chao put it, it's Nibbana, or the Dhamma is nok het nirpon, outside of cause, nok het nirpon, above effect. So that is unimaginable. No time, no identity, no space, no cause and effect. Language and number doesn't apply, language doesn't apply, concepts don't apply. But it is the fundamental reality. So that it's really using those words, he didn't, it's a very, very small proportion, like maybe 0.1% of the sutta teachings when he talks in these words. 99.9% is talking about the path to arrive at the realization of that. Because he knew if you try and describe ultimate reality, no one's going to understand. That's why immediately after the Enlightenment, I would say, is one of the main reasons where he thought there's no point trying to explain this. how can you describe the unborn, unoriginated, uncreated, unformed, the timeless, the unlocated, where space doesn't apply, identity doesn't apply, time doesn't apply, number and concepts don't apply. How can you describe that? So his first thought was just to be a hermit, just to nang sabai. And then Brahma Sahampati, like you recite every evening, Brahma Chaloka Adipati. Then Brahma Sahampati picked up that thought in the mind of the newly awakened Buddha and thought, oh no, the world will be lost, the world will be utterly lost. So he beamed down in front of the Buddha, like in Star Trek, zip, beamed down in front of the Buddha and said, please, Venerable Sir, for the sake of those with just a little dust in their eyes, please teach the Dhamma. So the Buddha spent 99.9% of the teaching on the path and kind of 0.1% on the nature of the goal. But the book, The Island, that Ajahn Pasano and I put together, spent 10 years, that's the 0.1%. So we did a whole 400-page book on that, because it doesn't get much coverage in the Pali Canon. So we put all of those teachings relating to that area together. So these qualities, ajatang, abhutang, akatang, asankatang, what they're doing is highlighting the habit of attachment to jati, to birth, to bhuta, to being, to cause and effect, hepon, to formations, and then helping the mind to say no, 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 drop that. And so it's illuminating the habit of attachment, but it's not saying, not kind of giving you an image to attach to instead.
In this sense, you think that an experiences of samadhi help us to have a glimpse of it?
Yes and no. Depends what kind of samadhi, I would say. It's particularly the insight into not self, I would say, because samadhi can be very blissful, but like the Brahmaloka, which represent the kind of the higher jhanas, third jhana, fourth jhana, arupa jhana. So in the suttas, the Brahmas are often the ones who got the most sort of profound delusions, like I am the great I am Brahma, the great Brahma. The delusion of being is extremely strong because they got this fantastic samadhi. They're in blissful states and very, very focused. So samadhi on its own could be a major obstruction to that. And so that the Buddha does not recommend being born in the Brahma world for enlightenment. The human realm is the most fertile ground for enlightenment. That's why Buddhas always appear in the human realm. You never find a Buddha being enlightened in the Deva realm or the Brahma realm. They can go visit, but the Anuttara Sammasambodhi occurs in the human realm, because this is the best ground. You have the perfect mixture of dukkha and sukha there. And so that Brahma gods and Devas, it's difficult for them to understand dukkha, which is why when we have a funeral, we chant the Abhidhamma, because that's what the Buddha is supposed to have taught to the Deva who was his mother, because Devas can't understand the Four Noble Truths. Dukkha, shmukha, what dukkha? Everything's fine. Yeah. So that the Abhidhamma traditionally was used to explain the structure of reality, because dukkha is not apparent to Devas and Brahmas. So that's why when you have a funeral in Thailand, it's not the same in other Buddhist countries, but in Thailand there's the custom kusala dhamma, akusala dhamma. That's reciting the contents page of the Abhidhamma. And that's why it's done. It's like assuming, oh, the person who just died, they've gone to the Deva realm, so they don't understand dukkha anymore. So we have to spell out the Abhidhamma for them. That's why you have that custom, just in case you didn't know. Most of you didn't know, right? That's what, thus have I heard. That's why we chant the Abhidhamma. It's sort of wishful thinking that the being who's passed on is beyond ordinary everyday dukkha. So that the I would say it's the crucial thing is the insight into not self. And so, like when the Buddha has that encounter with the Brahma god Baka, Baka was a teacher of the Bodhisattva in a previous lifetime, and then the Buddha picks up this thought in the mind of this Brahma that said, "I am Brahma, the great Brahma. I'm the creator, the Almighty." And the Buddha thinks, "Oh dear, my teacher, who helped me so much all those lifetimes ago, this being is really deluded and thinks that he is the creator, the Almighty, the sort of foundation of the universe." So he goes up to the Brahma world to meet Baka, and tries to relieve Baka of that conceit that says, "You're not the Almighty, you're not the creator. There's actually 17 Brahma realms above the realm where you live that you don't even know about." So Baka's a bit confused. Also, interestingly enough, the clue to Baka being conceited is in the name, because and this was again Venerable Ananda Maitreya said a lot of translators miss this kind of thing, but there's a lot of humor in the Pali canon. So Baka means a heron, a bird with a long beak. And in Indian mythology, the heron is always kind of proud and pompous, arrogant in the Indian folklore. And so the name of the Brahma being heron gives you the clue, oh, this is a pompous, arrogant twit. And so that it's a kind of a funny story. But most translators miss that because they don't know the Indian folklore. So that the Buddha's trying to get Baka to let go of that conceit. So the teaching that he gives is around conceit and helping the Brahma god to let go of that, because he's so kind of drunk on his own brightness and greatness. So in terms of samadhi being a support, as long as that samadhi is fully infused with the insight into not self, then all good. If it's not, it can be a problem. Often people who have really good concentration can be really opinionated, in my experience. Very sure of their own rightness, and so that the samadhi can be a cause for greater attachment. Can be.
ครับกราบนมัสการพระอาจารย์ครับ Can I ask what are the differences between sanya and panya in meditation context? Because during meditation, we try to develop the skill to deal with nibbana, and we each have that skill or technique, but I'm not sure what is panya or sanya, and it seems doesn't matter in the samadhi because it's working. But I just want to know, is there any difference in character between sanya and panya? ขอบคุณครับ
Yeah, you want to answer? You can speak and give a Thai answer.
สำหรับอาตมาสัญญาเนี่ยในตัวศัพท์เราก็จะแปลถึงความหมายรู้ความจำได้นะรู้ว่าอะไรเป็นอะไรมันจะเป็นเน้นในฝ่ายของความทรงจำมากกว่านะแต่ปัญญานี่จะเป็นเรื่องของความกระจ่างนะหรือความเข้าใจนะตัวชี้วัดระหว่างไอ้สัญญาและปัญญาในขณะนั่งสมาธิเป็นไปได้ว่ามันอาจจะไม่ชัดมองไม่เห็นในขณะที่ตรงนั้นแต่ว่าผลมันจะชัดมากกว่าว่าถ้ามันเป็นปัญญาเนี่ยปัญหามันก็หายทุกข์มันก็ต้องหายนะแต่ถ้าสูว่ามันยังทุกข์ก็ยังเหมือนเดิมแสดงว่าก็ไม่ใช่ปัญญาละขึ้นอยู่ระดับของปัญญาใช่ไหมปัญญามีหลายระดับใช่ไหมปัญญาที่เกิดจากการฟังการคิดและปัญญาที่เกิดจากการภาวนาแล้วภาวนามันก็จะมีแบบอินไซต์หลายระดับบางอย่างมันก็เป็นทำให้เรากระจ่างเข้าใจแล้วแบบนี้เองที่เป็นปัญหาความทุกข์ของเราแล้วก็คลายไปแต่มันมีบางกรณีที่เราภาวนาไปแล้ว สามารถจะคลี่คลายทำความเข้าใจปัญหานั้นได้ทุกเฉพาะเรื่องนั้นสามารถจะหายไปอย่างเบ็ดเสร็จเด็ดขาดไม่เกิดอีกเลยอย่างนี้ก็มีมันก็แล้วแต่ระดับ
A short way of expressing it would be that panya is what knows sanya. Sanya just means perception. So seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. And when the Buddha defines what is sanya, sanya is perceiving. Perceiving what? Perceiving yellow, perceiving red, perceiving blue, perceiving green. So it's ordinary. So then panya is the wisdom faculty that knows, oh, there is seeing. Here is the knowing of this color yellow, or this color blue or green. So panya is the knowing faculty, and sanya is the details of the object in terms of sense perception.
กราบนมัสการพระอาจารย์นะคะ Well, it's a follow-up question from yesterday, which was about from one life to the next.
Oh, yes.
Habits or karma, old karma, new karma. Did the Buddha say anything about the first karma, the beginning of the mind before it started to be busy?
Good question. There's many places, there's a whole section of the Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses, which is called On No Discoverable Beginning. And so there's a whole series of talks that there is no discoverable, there is no definable beginning to samsara. And also when the Buddha spoke about what are called the four achinteya, the four imponderables, these things that the conceptual mind, the mind of language and thinking cannot encompass the reality. So one is all the workings of karma, one is the levels of jhana, concentration, one is the range of the mind of a Buddha, and then the other one is the ultimate beginning of things. And so it's not like, yes, there is a beginning, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. He's saying, no, the thinking mind and imagination doesn't have the capacity to encompass the reality. So it's one of those areas like, no, this is all in the leaves on the trees that I don't talk about. In the Simsapa forest, he said, this is a handful of leaves. What I teach is suffering, origin, cessation, path. And so some people find that quite irritating, like, and it's kind of unique because almost every religion around the world, from folk beliefs and animist religions in tribal societies to the world religions, everyone has an origin story of where the universe came from and how humans came into being. And what you have in the Pali Canon, like in the Aganya Sutta, in the long discourses, the Digha Nikaya, the Buddha says, well, if you want to know how a world begins, it's like this. And he describes, so at the end of an eon, most beings are reborn in the Abhasa Brahma realm or above. And then at the end of that intermediary period, then a new universe arises, and then beings start appearing in coarser and coarser realms. And he describes how the evolution of physical bodies and eating food and people engaging in sex together and then getting into conflicts. And but basically that sutta is not given much prominence. It's like, if you want to know how a world begins, it's like this. But the number of worlds that have come into being and have collapsed is uncountable. It's incalculable. The number of cycles of universal expansion and contraction, or like big bangs and big crunches, as you would say in astrophysics, is incalculable, unnameable. Or how many universes there are, it's incalculable. Because also in the Pali Canon, they talk about parallel universes. It's all spelled out. So the Buddha basically says, don't think about it. Because, and again, not because I know and I'm not going to tell you. It was realizing any kind of way you try to describe the reality, it can't match what's really happening. Like what is the universe like without matter or without individual beings? Where did the first being come from? He said, no, that being, coming from, all that implies time and location, identity. So it's all missing the point. So what he did do was he taught Paticca Samuppada. And so that rather than talking about things in a cosmological state, so rather than where did living beings come from, or where did human beings come from, he said, okay, let's focus on what's actually knowable. That's right. Where does dukkha come from? And so he deliberately narrowed the field from cosmic scale of like, where do we come from? Where are we going? What should I do now? It's kind of the three main questions most religions try to answer from all around the world. Where do we come from? Where are we going? How am I supposed to live? Or what's the best way to live? And so the Buddha narrows it down to what, rather than the cosmic level, he takes it down to the human level, the discernible level, speaking of discernment, the knowable level. And so, okay, rather than where do living beings come from, or say, where does dukkha come from? So then that's what we can know. Avijja, paccaya, sankhara, ignorance, conditions, formations, sankhara, paccaya, vijnana, and so on through the stages of dependent origination, the 12 links classically. So he said that's what we can know, and we can recognize that pattern. When there's ignorance, when there's not seeing clearly, then the subject-object relationship, this is the short version, the subject-object relationship takes shape. There's a vijnana and namarupa. There's a knowing faculty and an objective faculty. So that the subject and object get separated from each other. Then with a particular perceptual event, there's phassa, sense contact, seeing. Then contact leads to feeling, feeling leads to craving, craving leads to clinging, clinging leads to becoming, becoming leads to birth, birth leads to sukha parideva dukkha domanassa upayasa, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. And then and that's how the dukkha arises. And so that teaching of dependent origination, even though some people do use it to talk about past lives and future lives, or even on a cosmic level, it seems that the Buddha mainly gave that teaching to say, focus the attention on, don't worry about where living beings come from, where does dukkha come from? That's the thing to focus on. And what is the fundamental nature of a living being? Don't worry about it. These things are beyond the scope of imagination and language. But what we can know is dukkha, origin, and then dukkha nirodha, cessation. So if there's no ignorance, avijjaya taveva asesa viraga nirodha, if there isn't ignorance, then that doesn't give rise to the subject-object division. When sense contact arises, there isn't the same kind of vedana paccaya tanha, feeling, conditioning, craving, and so on. So no dukkha arises. The simple version is that Ajahn Sumedho would give, if you start off with avijja, you get dukkha. If you start off with vijja, you get nibbana. So in respect to, there's many teachings on dependent origination, and those of you who've done some Ban Nam San retreats and that were at, did a series of, I think 3 or 4 retreats at Ban Nam San in Chiang Mai on dependent origination, and so that at the request of the gang, so I cover that a lot in many of these retreats here in Thailand. But one of the significant teachings, you have the 11 or 12 links, 10 and 12 links of dependent origination described in many teachings. One particular teaching that is very significant is like, well, how does the perceptual process work when there is not avijja, when there's when the mind is not dominated by ignorance or a lack of mindfulness? And interestingly enough, it starts off with the word chanda, chandamula. So rooted in interest are all things. Born of attention are all things. arising from contact are all things, diverging into feelings are all things, headed by concentration are all things, dominated by mindfulness are all things, surmounted by wisdom are all things, yielding deliverance as their essence are all things, emerging in the deathless are all things, terminating in nibbana are all things. So it's in the Book of the Tens, Sutta number 61 in the Anguttara Nikaya, Numerical Discourses. So that is like, okay, in the perceptual world, rooted in interest, interested in the microphone or the flowers or the, is what I'm saying. Interest gives rise to attention. Attention then feeds the quality of contact, so that you're interested, there's attention, contact, seeing. From that contact, rather than that then leading to feeling and then craving, pasa, vedana, tanha, which is the track in dependent origination based on ignorance, you have contact gives rise to feeling, but then feeling headed by concentration, dominated by mindfulness, surmounted by wisdom. So you have samadhi, sati, panya. So when a feeling arises, painful feeling in the body, or blissful feeling in the mind, or comfortable feeling in the body, then headed by concentration, mindfulness, and wisdom recognizes here is a feeling. It's an uncomfortable feeling, or it's a pleasant feeling. The mind focuses on that, doesn't add anything to it. It doesn't condition craving. So that same Vedana is held by concentration, mindfulness, and wisdom, samadhi, sati, and panya. So then, if a feeling is really held in that environment of concentration, mindfulness, and wisdom, samadhi, sati, and panya, then that feeling, even if it's a painful feeling, it leads to vimutti, yielding deliverance as essence. And then that, in turn, brings the realization of the deathless, the amata Dhamma, and then the realization of the deathless leads to nibbana, to peacefulness. So that is like the whole perceptual, experiential process when there is vijja in the mix rather than avijja, when there's awareness. So there's a little book that I did, and the copies in this country are a bit rare, but you can find it on the Amaravati website, called Catastrophe Apostrophe. Catastrophe Apostrophe. The Buddha's teaching on dependent origination. And that's got actually a lot of the 3 or 4 retreats from Ban Nam San on dependent origination. A lot of the material comes from that. And also a retreat I did in France on the same theme. So it's all there in that little book, complete with diagrams. So when the retreat is over, you can look that up online. We haven't got copies here, but it's Catastrophe Apostrophe. The Pachaya, the arising side is the catastrophe, and the Nirodha side is the apostrophe.
What were the 4 unknowable things again that you mentioned?
The 4 achinteya.
Sorry.
Chinta is to think. Achinteya means unthinkable or imponderable. So the range of the mind of a Buddha, all the workings of karma and vipaka, cause and effect, all the levels of jhana, and then the ultimate origin of things. And then the book in the Samyutta on no discoverable beginning. Then they're quite short suttas, but each of them starts in the same way. He says, bhikkhus, there is no, this samsara, this round is with no discoverable beginning. So then he gives these images like, if you imagine Vepula mountain, if that was 100 leagues high, 100 yojanas high, 100 yojanas long, 100 yojanas wide, and then a bird comes along with a silk scarf once every 100 years and lands on this great mountain, you know, that mountain would be worn away before even one day of the time span of samsara has passed. Yeah, incalculable, without a discoverable beginning is this samsara. And then he comes up with, each sutta has another kind of graphic image of long periods of time. So it's also, yeah, the as I said, in the Pali Canon, you have references to parallel universes and extremely long periods of time, like the lifespan of Brahma gods, or how many eons have passed. So that if you put all the numbers together, you get lots and lots and lots of zeros. So mind-boggling. So the 13.8 billion years since the last Big Bang is like Wetio. Hardly even counts. You can tell I'm a fan of popular science. So. Yes, one at the back there. Yeah.
Namaskaran, Ajahn. So talking about Amaravati temple, I wanted to ask, because when I visited, I noticed there were numbers of female bhikkhus at the monasteries. Do you think this will ever happen in Thailand?
Yeah. The nuns community at Amaravati are what are called Silatara. So the basic ordination they have is 10 precepts, but a system of training was developed based on the Bhikkhu Patimokkha, the Bhikkhuni Patimokkha, and the Samanera training. So they have about 150 extra training rules that they follow. So they wear dark brown robes, they have alms bowls, they go an alms round, they have also equal responsibilities in the monastery. So there's a lot of aspects to their lives that are a bit unique to this that community. And so the Luang Por Sumedho created that form for women's monastic training 40 years ago, 1983. He brought that into being, and that was through consultation with the elders here in Thailand, because he could see that the 8 precept Mechi form was not going to work in the West for Western women in particular. What happened was that Chithurst Monastery was opened in 1979, and at that point, I was there about 3 or 4 months after they opened. I arrived in October. The monastery had opened in June, and I arrived in England from Thailand just a few days before the first 4 women took the 8 precepts, and just before the first 2 men became bhikkhus. So that there was like 27th and 28th of October 1979, there are these 2 ordinations, 2 bhikkhus, and then the 4 8 precept nuns. And so then as the years went by, in 1980, 81, 82, so then in 81, they established a Sima boundary at Chithurst, so they could do ordinations at Chithurst. The first ones in 79 had been done on a boat on the River Thames, what they call an Udaka Sima. So then Ajahn Sumedho conducts the first ordinations at Chithurst, your first 3 bhikkhus ordained, and there are the nuns, about 5 or 6 of them by now, sitting there in their white robes. 82 comes along, more bhikkhus coming into being, more men going into white. The nuns are still sitting there, their white robes, and these men having their bhikkhu ordinations. So people began to ask, well, Tanajan, to Ajahn Sumedho. So some of these men who are becoming bhikkhus today, they arrived after the first 4 nuns. So are these nuns going to be in the kitchen for the next 40 years, driving errands to the local builders merchants and paying the bills, or what's going to happen for them? So that was 1982, and he thought, good question. I had actually been thinking about that. And so he could see, like, yeah, well, that's a fair question. And, the nuns were not complaining. They were sitting there, but time was going by. These other men were coming along and going through the anagarika and then bhikkhu training. And he said, yeah, this doesn't look good, that we can't possibly carry on with having a totally different system for the women and for the men. So Ajahn Sumedho is a very creative thinker. and he was also aware of Buddhist history, and he knew that the bhikkhuni ordination had faded out in the southern Buddhist world about 1,000 years ago. In the last recorded bhikkhunis in the southern Buddhist world in 1073 in Sri Lanka. And that's the last records. And after that, they seem to have disappeared through famine and various social changes. And none in India, none ever in Thailand, apparently, or seemingly, never in Myanmar. And so there hadn't been any bhikkhunis in the Theravada world for about 1,000 years. And so there had been in China, and the nuns in China came from Sri Lanka in the year 432. Delegation from Sri Lanka went to China. So the Chinese bhikshunis actually have a Theravada lineage. Interesting. So I've studied this a bit as well as popular science. So I'm quite knowledgeable. The captain of the boat who took the nuns from Sri Lanka to China, to Nanjing, was called Nandi. And they have the names of all the nuns who were on the boat as well. So I haven't memorized all of those. So anyway, Luang Por thought about this. He looked into the Buddhist history and he thought, well, you can't just, bhikkhus can't restore the nuns' order. You have to have nuns to ordain, you have to have bhikkhunis to ordain bhikkhunis. A bhikkhu can't ordain bhikkhunis. So that wasn't up to him. But what a bhikkhu can do is he can give a woman 10 precepts and live on a 10 precept ordination. And in Sri Lanka, that's what happened a lot. There was 10 precept nuns called Dasa Sila Mata. So he was aware of that, thought, well, maybe we can use the Dasa Sila model. And also he had an elder Sri Lankan monk in England, Dr. Sadatisa, who carried out the first ordinations, was a very helpful consultant. Then he came back to Thailand. He spoke with Luang Por Chah was already unwell and couldn't speak by that time. So he spoke to Luang Por Jan and the elders from Wat Papong. He spoke to Ajahn Buddhadasa, Chakum Panyananda, and consulted with, I think, Tanchakum Payut as well. And so he thought, well, what we can do is we can make a 10 precept ordination and we can fill it out, but we can't possibly make the women's order bhikkhunis. It's beyond my power as a monk. So that's what happened. So 1983, those first 4 nuns, Sister Rochana, Sister Sundara, Sister Chandasiri, Sister Tanisara, took the 10 precepts, went into brown robes, gave up using money, and that was the beginning of the Siladhara community. So that's carried on through various changes. It took about 7 years to develop their training precepts. And myself, Ajahn Sujita, was given the task of helping the nuns to create their own training. And so I was his upatak, was kind of assistant a lot of the time. So for 7 years, they went through the whole kind of training system and developed this system of rules. So that's what exists for the Siladhara now. I'm the preceptor for them since Ajahn Sumedho retired. So in terms of Thailand and the 10 precept Siladhara form for Thailand, about 7 or 8 years ago, I sat down with 5 of the elder nuns and Tan Somdet Payut, from Punapon. Somdet Buddha Gosajang. His name keeps changing. So, and he gave us a 2-hour-long discussion, and we were asking about their training and his opinions about the Siladhara form. And he was enthusiastic. He thought this would actually be a very good thing for Thailand. And so most of the nuns were very sort of impressed and surprised by that. But he was very much, and this is all on, we got this on film, had 2 cameras going and recording. So he was very enthusiastic. He thought it would be a good thing for Thailand, but exactly how that would begin or take shape or who would lead that, he said that's up for you to work out. But in principle, he felt it was a very, very good idea. So that's a long answer, but whether it could or would happen in Thailand, it's possible. But there would have to be the people who are interested to live that way and train that way, and a place to be.
Thank you. It's
a long story. But the Luang Por Sumedho was always very supportive of the nuns community. He took a lot of risks because creating that 10 precept ordination for the liberals, it wasn't enough. There's not enough. There should be bhikkhunis. They should have the full ordination. And for the conservatives, it's too much. It's too much. What are you doing? Putting nuns into brown? That's outrageous. Carrying alms bowls. Ugh. So there was about the same amount of annoyance at both extremes. So he thought, okay, I think I got it right. Everyone's a bit dissatisfied. So I think it's just about the right balance. And so then when one of the main reasons that Amaravati was started was to create a place particularly for the nuns, a bigger place. So the original vision of Amaravati was it would be a nuns center, a retreat place, and then a few bhikkhus would be around to help back things up. That was the original idea. It changed a bit. But the best buildings on the site were immediately given to the nuns community. And we've since, as we started replacing the old buildings with the new ones, they've also got the best buildings, apart from Luang Por Sumedho's kuti. But the others, they have we rebuilt that part of the monastery with the eco-friendly structures. So we tried to do what we can to create a supportive environment for women's training. But in the Theravada Southern Buddhist world, it's a kind of an ongoing process, an ongoing issue. And so there are communities of fully ordained nuns who've taken their ordination through China and Korea and restarted a Theravada Bhikkhuni lineage. So that's slowly moving, but not everybody has the same opinions about the precepts or the validity of ordination and so on and so forth. So for now, we're definitely sticking with the Sila Dhara form for our community. I get asked about this quite often, and it's my responsibility, so in many respects. But I feel that it's a very good training environment for people. And that was always Luang Por Sumedho's emphasis. It's not about status, it's about training. And so a lot of the lobbying for full ordination, he realized, well, a lot of the people who are asking for full ordination for women, they wouldn't follow these rules. They wouldn't live that way. If you read the Bhikkhuni Vinaya, it's pretty restrictive. If you're a bhikkhuni, you can't travel outside of your monastery alone without another bhikkhuni, without breaking a very, very serious rule. You have to be within a 4 arms distance of another nun every night if you're outside your monastery. How many women would like to live that way? Sharing a room with somebody else whenever you're traveling, even a sister nun. But and then a very serious rule: if you don't do that, it will be broken. So if you want to live that way, great, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. But not many people want to make that kind of a commitment. So for me, I feel that Luang Por Sumedho's choice of establishing the Sila Dhara order was a kind of brilliant and very courageous move, and I'm fully supportive of it for our community. And in 100 years' time, who knows what shape things will be? But this particular generation, I'm very happy to be serving and supporting it, the nuns community as they are. Do you want to explain what you're doing, Ajahn? To let them know why you won't be around?
Just a few minutes. คือพอดีอาตมามีกิจอยู่ที่วัดจะต้องไปทำธุระก่อนแล้วจะกลับมาในช่วงท้ายท่านอาจารย์ให้อธิบายว่าเดี๋ยวโยมก็จะสงสัยว่าอาจารย์นี้หายไปไหน คือที่วัดมีโครงการปลูกป่าแล้วก็จะมีญาติโยมมาทำพิธีปลูกป่าซึ่งมันซ้อนกับงานนี้พอดีก็เลยกราบเรียนท่านอาจารย์ตั้งแต่ก่อนรับงานแล้วว่ามันจะมีงานนี้ด้วยท่านอาจารย์ก็บอกว่างั้นก็มาช่วยแล้วก็กลับไปก็ได้ก็เลยเป็นอย่างนั้นก็พรุ่งนี้ก็จะเป็นการเหมือนกับไปเตรียมสถานที่ว่าต้นไหนจะปลูกที่ไหนอะไรอย่างเงี้ยนะแล้วก็การจัดการจะเป็นยังไงแล้วก็วางแผนนะ เพราะว่ามีต้นไม้เยอะบางส่วนก็จะปลูกไว้ก่อนตั้งแต่พรุ่งนี้เลย แล้วถึงเวลาที่มีพิธีก็จะคนที่มาก็จะมาร่วมกันปลูกก็เลยอธิบายให้ฟังว่าก็จะลาไปวันนี้แล้วก็มาเจอญาติโยมทีวันเสาร์